That kick will pay dividends.
Nice right hand.
Silva trying to finish it here. Another knee. And down goes Franklin.
Big elbows, staying busy there is Paddy Pimblett.
It's good, doing a good job defensively, though. Big elbow, need a shot there. Oh, yeah, that hurt. He's hurt. Jon Jones was hurt. Bear is hurt.
There's the choke.
He's got it. It's under the neck.
There it is.
Nope, it's on the chin.
There's the tap. Still undisputed. Khabib Nurmagomedov.
Good overhead right by Ronda.
And a big throwdown.
Right
Can
away.
she do it right here? Just like that. Are you kidding me?
Wow, she doesn't even know what's going on.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Knuckle Game Podcast, the home of combat sports conversation, where we break down the biggest stories in mixed martial arts without the hype, without the bias, just real talk. Today's episode might start an argument before we even get 5 minutes in, though, because we're asking one question that every MMA fan thinks they already know the answer to, and that's, who's the greatest superstar in UFC history? Notice I didn't say the greatest fighter. I didn't say the greatest champion. I didn't even say the greatest pound-for-pound athlete. I said superstar. Those are completely different conversations. A superstar changes pay-per-view. A superstar brings in people who don't even watch MMA. A superstar sells out arenas. A superstar becomes bigger than the sport itself. So today, we're putting every legend on trial. Conor McGregor, Jon Jones, Georges St-Pierre, Anderson Silva, Khabib Nurmagomedov, Ronda Rousey, and maybe even some names from today's generation. By the end of this episode, you may change your mind. Or you might be typing an angry comment before we're done. Either way, let's get into it. Now, the rules. Before we even start ranking fighters, we need rules. Because everyone uses a different definition. Some fans only care about championships. Others only care about money. Others think if casual fans know your name, you've already won. Championships, title defenses, pay-per-view sales, media attention, global fame, social media, sponsorship, influence, and legacy. Those are the rules. That's what we're grading by. I think a true UFC superstar checks as many of these boxes as possible. Not just one. Because if championships alone mattered, the biggest star wouldn't necessarily be the biggest draw. And if money alone mattered, then we'd ignore everything that happened inside the Octagon. Make sense? All right, well, let's get into it, man. Conor McGregor. Let's start with the obvious answer. Conor McGregor, love him, hate him, laugh at him. You cannot erase what he has accomplished. He became the first simultaneous two-division UFC champion. He knocked out Jose Aldo in 13 seconds. He headlined events that broke records. His press conferences became entertainment on their own. He crossed over into boxing. He built businesses outside the cage. For years, he wasn't just the face of the UFC. He was one of the most recognizable athletes on the planet. But here's where the debate begins. The criticism. Championships, only a handful. Title defenses, none. His career after becoming double champion became more inconsistent. Does that diminish what he's achieved? Or is his impact on the sport so large that those accomplishments outweigh the later setbacks? See, that's where the debate gets interesting. Now let's talk about the man many people consider the greatest mixed martial artist of all time, Jon Jones. His resume is almost unmatched. He defeated champions across multiple generations. His fight IQ is legendary. His creativity inside the cage changed how people think about MMA. When fans discuss pure greatness, Jon Jones is almost always in the conversation. But here's the question. Was he ever the cultural phenomenon that Conor became? The greatest fighter and the biggest superstar aren't necessarily the same title. Now let's talk about one of the most mesmerizing fighters the sport has ever seen. Anderson, the Spider Silva. For an entire generation, watching Anderson Silva didn't feel like watching a fight. It felt like watching art. He wasn't simply beating opponents. He was making elite fighters look ordinary. When people talk about fighters being levels above the competition, they're describing what Anderson Silva did during his championship reign. Without a doubt. What made Anderson Silva so different wasn't just his striking. It was his confidence, hands down, head movement, standing inches away from punches, making opponents miss by fractions of an inch, almost daring them to hit him. Fans called it the Matrix movement because it looked like something straight out of the movie. Nobody had ever seen anything quite like it. Anderson Silva was that different. He was that dude. Let's talk about the Matrix era. Long middleweight title reign. Multiple title defenses. Elite striking accuracy. Legendary highlight reel knockouts. And then came one of the most iconic knockouts in UFC history. The front kick against Vitor Belfort. One perfectly timed strike. One of the most replayed finishes the sport has ever seen. Almost overnight, front kicks became a weapon every fighter wanted to master. That's influence. That's changing the sport. Silva didn't just win. He inspired a generation of strikers, Israel Adesanya, Alex Pereira, Carlos Prates. Countless fighters have pointed to Anderson Silva as one of their biggest inspirations. Anderson's style helped redefine what striking and mixed martial arts could look like. But here's an interesting question. If Instagram, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, and today's social media had existed back in 2008, would Anderson Silva have become an even bigger global icon? Would millions more have discovered the genius of the Spider? That's one of the biggest what-ifs in UFC history. What if social media was around in 2008 when Anderson Silva reigned? Would he have become the biggest global icon? Now, we're talking about pre-social social media now. So let's talk about Georges St-Pierre, the blueprint of greatness. Let's talk about this gentleman of mixed martial arts. Georges St-Pierre, if Anderson Silva was the artist, GSP was the scientist. Everything had a purpose. Every jab, every takedown, every round, every decision was calculated. GSP wasn't interested in flashy trash talk. He wasn't trying to become the loudest personality in the room. He let excellence speak for him. And excellence spoke pretty loudly. Multiple championship reigns, long-term dominance, elite wrestling and striking, minimal controversy, and massive international respect. After years away from competition, most people thought his championship days were over. Then he returned, moved up in weight class, and defeated Michael Bisping to become a 2-division UFC champion. Very few athletes leave, come back years later, and immediately win another world title. That's legendary. GSP also helped change what professionalism looked like in MMA. Respectful, prepared, disciplined, always in incredible condition, incredible shape. He became the role model organizations wanted representing their sport. Not because he demanded attention, but because he earned it. So here's the debate. Is consistency more valuable than flash? Would you rather have a spectacular rise or a sustained greatness for years? That's why Georges St-Pierre remains one of the strongest candidates in this conversation. Now let's talk about Khabib Nurmagomedov, the Eagle, the undefeated Eagle. Now we come to one of the most dominant champions the UFC has ever seen, Khabib Nurmagomedov. "29 fights, 29 victories, 0 defeats. That's almost unheard of in mixed martial arts. Smashing opponents. Everyone knew exactly what Khabib was going to do. Take you down, control you, break your will, and somehow nobody could stop it. His grappling wasn't just effective, it was suffocating. Elite fighters looked for help. The Eagle, 29-0, undefeated champion, dominant wrestler, massive global fan base, retired as champion. And then came the biggest fight in UFC history. Khabib versus Conor McGregor. More than a championship, it became a cultural event. Different nations, different personalities, different philosophies. The entire world was watching. When Khabib won, his global popularity exploded. International crowds, fans in Dagestan, training camps. Oh my God. Perhaps the most surprising decision of his career came after he reached the top. He retired. Still champ. Still undefeated. I think that was pretty smart. He walked away before the sport could take everything from him. That's almost unheard of. So here's the question. Does an undefeated legacy outweigh a shorter career? Would Khabib's legend be even greater if he had defended the title several more times? Or did retiring at the perfect moment make him even more iconic? That's a fascinating debate. Now let's talk about someone who completely transformed the UFC. Ronda Rousey. Whether you loved her or you couldn't stand her, there's one thing almost everyone agrees on. Women's MMA would not be where it is today without Ronda. Give me some pushback on that. Nobody, no female, no woman in the game's name was ringing like Ronda Rousey. When Ronda Rousey stepped on the scene, it was crazy. Then she had good looks. Then she was flipping people all over the place and armbarring you and snapping your arm and twisting your spine. When Ronda arrived, she wasn't just winning. She was finishing elite opponents in seconds, armbar after armbar, hip toss after hip toss, first round after first round. Fans couldn't believe what they were watching. I know I couldn't. I was questioning the competition. Is this girl that good? First UFC women's champion, mainstream crossover celebrity, Hollywood appearances, multiple title defenses, helped launch women's MMA. That's Ronda Rousey, y'all. She appeared on magazine covers, late night television shows, Hollywood films, Sports Illustrated, ESPN. For a period of time, Ronda Rousey became one of the biggest stars in all of sports. Bet you didn't know that. Not just the UFC. Eventually, every champion loses. But Ronda's impact didn't disappear with those defeats. She proved women could headline major UFC events. She helped create opportunities for generations that followed. Today, every female champion owes something to the doors Ronda helped open. I said it. Every female champion owes something to Ronda Rousey, without a doubt. Sometimes influence matters just as much as championships, because changing the sport can be even more important than dominating. Now, can anyone ever reach that level again? So that brings us to today's generation. The biggest question of all, can anyone ever become the next global UFC superstar? 3 names come to mind immediately: Paddy Pimblett, Ilia Topuria, and Tom Aspinall. Each brings something completely different to the table. Paddy brings his charisma, his viral personality, his massive fan engagement. Topuria Well, his once undefeated aura, we'll have to see how he bounces back from this loss to Gaethje, but his knockout power and his growing international appeal, that makes him a candidate. Let's say Tom Aspinall, heavyweight champion, athleticism, likable personality. But today's landscape is very different back when Conor exploded. Everyone watched the same television shows, the same interviews, the same press conferences. Today, attention is divided across hundreds of platforms: TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Shorts, X, streaming, podcasts. Fans consume content differently than ever before. Some on their phones, some scroll through social media. I mean, people are getting content is everywhere now. So that means becoming a global crossover star may actually be harder today than it was a decade ago. Talent alone isn't enough. You need personality, storytelling, timing, the right rivalries, the right performances against those rivals, and maybe a little magic. So who has the best chance? Can Paddy become the next crossover entertainer? Can Ilya become the next global champion? Can Tom Aspinall carry the heavyweight division into a new era? Or have we already witnessed the biggest superstar the UFC will ever produce? That's the debate. So this is the final round. Who wins? If your criteria is fighting skills, you might choose Jon Jones. If it's sustained dominance, maybe Georges St-Pierre or Anderson Silva. If it's an undefeated legacy, Khabib has a compelling case. If it's transforming women's MMA, Ronda Rousey deserves a serious consideration. But if you're asking who became the biggest global superstar the UFC has ever produced, Conor McGregor remains the benchmark. I said it, Conor McGregor remains the benchmark. I mean, because his rise changed fighter pay, promotional expectations, media coverage, and what athletes believed was possible outside the cage. The harder question now isn't whether he was the biggest superstar. It's whether anyone will ever surpass him. I'm going to end with this. Now it's your turn. Don't just tell us who you picked. Tell us why. Who was the greatest UFC superstar of all time? And what matters the most to you? Championships, dominance, influence, or global fame? I want to read your arguments in the comments, guys. And I want to say thank you guys again. Thank you for watching the Knuckle Game Podcast. If you enjoyed today's debate, hit the like button, subscribe, and share this episode with one of the biggest MMA fans you know. This episode was brought to you by Juggernaut Snacks, Knuckle Sandwich, a premium snack inspired by the fight game and built for fans who appreciate bold flavor. Until next time, keep your hands up, chin down, and we'll see you on the next episode of Knuckle Game Podcast.